Years ago, I was a student in radio, television, and film. Even then and before, my favorite part of those stories was the storytelling that happened in them. I believe we're hardwired for story. God created us to be community and to be in community with each other and with God. Well, one of my favorite storytelling devices was in the old Western serials, when they'd have about 3 stories going at once in every direction. The hero would be at the canyon with the horse thieves lined up with rifles on the ridge, and then the narrator would break in and say, "Meanwhile, back at the ranch," and we'd go back there. Before I dive in deep today, I want to go back to the ranch from Pastor Craig's sermon last week when he got us launched into the book of James. He reminded us that James has 3 themes throughout his letters. What is genuine faith, doing good deeds, and real wisdom, compared to the worldly wisdom that results in selfishness. Following the way of Jesus is a way of genuine trust, goodness, and actual wisdom. And we need those things really badly in our world today. As Jesus would advise, we should study God's word and then do it. So that's why we're calling this Be Doers of the Word, not the world. Bah. What does James tell us about genuine faith, or as he calls it in another version, true religion? James 1, verse 27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Simple, but not easy. Today, James goes on from there. He tells us that our faith always needs to be taking the word and doing things with it. Honor everyone as God's beloved children. Feed and clothe those who need to be fed and need clothing. Believe in the God who has called you by name, and do the work that God has called you to do. Today's gospel is all about people who believe and do something about it. Jesus has traveled a long way from home, maybe to get a little rest away from the religious leaders who are giving him a hard time constantly right now. He's trying to lay low, but that doesn't work. A woman, a Gentile believer, finds him, even in Lebanon, because that's where Tyre and Sidon are, and she is relentless. Like a mom with a sick child that you'd know today, she's fierce. She is not going to let this foreign rabbi who has the solution to healing her child go, even when he uses an insulting example of who he's been sent to heal. He pushes, she pushes back. If she's a dog, she counters, she's the kind of dog that's going to get the crumbs from the table that the children drop. This impresses Jesus enough that he heals her daughter without seeing her or touching her. Her faith has made that healing possible in an instant. Once that's done, Jesus goes back home again, and there, again, he can't get away from those who believe and whose faith is moving them to action. Mark says they, we don't know who they are, take a man who is deaf and has a speech impediment to Jesus. Might have been his friends, his neighbors, his family. Whoever they are, they know this man and they care about him. When there's a chance that he could be healed, they bring him to Jesus and they beg him to heal the man. This says that either Jesus has been here before or somewhere near here, and at least some of the folks know what Jesus is capable of doing somehow. They know that if Jesus lays hands on this man, he'll hear and he'll be able to speak. They believe that fervently. Now, this time, Jesus uses words and actions to heal. Not only does he tell the man's ears to be opened, he touches them, and he spits and touches the man's tongue. And of course, in a theme that goes all through Mark, that we've heard most of the year, he tells people not to say anything to anybody about how their friend has been healed, because he is healed immediately, as they know he would be. Now, do they listen to Jesus about the don't say anything part? This is Mark, so we know. No, they don't. Because that is the other part of Mark that is constant. Jesus tells people, don't say anything. And they always seem to take that to mean, well, tell everybody you know about what just happened here. They also say things about Jesus that aren't as clear to us as they would have been to the people in their own time. They say he's done things well, making the deaf hear and the mute speak. Well, that's not just a compliment to Jesus. They're quoting the book of Isaiah. That's the kind of thing Isaiah says will happen when the chosen one of God, the Messiah, comes. The blind will see, the lame will walk, the deaf will hear, the mute will speak. Jesus does all these things, and maybe that's why he tells them, still to no avail, not to say anything. Once the word gets around that people believe he's the Messiah, his powerful enemies are going to get even unhappier with him. And we know where that's going to lead. It's a blessing for the world and for us. But it's going to be the end of Jesus' work on earth once that word gets out. His brother James picked up on that work and told the church how to keep doing it. Take care of widows and orphans and those in distress. Don't show favoritism. I have examples of that going on, but as I had told Pastor Craig last night, I had printed out my sermon last night, but that doesn't mean it's not subject to change by this morning. And I found one more thing to add this morning, of course. One of the wonderful things about us going to one service at 10 is I get to do something I haven't been able to do in years, and that's watch CBS Sunday Morning, which I love. It's one of those, it's the storyteller thing. I love the stories they tell. And they told one that was straight out of the Don't Show Favoritism, Love Your Neighbor book this morning. Let me tell you about Annie and Lewis. Annie lives in Summerville, South Carolina. And when she moved as a white woman into an almost all-black neighborhood about 7 years ago, she decided to put up not just one, but multiple Confederate flags. Her neighbors were appalled. They saw that as an affront, and they protested in her yard. They put up fences where their property touched hers. Well, she didn't like that, so she just put up a taller flagpole. They put up taller fences. This war kept going on, and nobody gave until about 6 months ago. Annie had a heart attack. The doctors told her the next one would probably be fatal. And she started looking at her actions and her life in a different light. Not just what she was doing for herself, but how does she live as a neighbor? She started to see all these things that she'd been doing through the eyes of her neighbors, not just her own. She took down her Confederate flag, and she went to the neighborhood community center, run by Lewis, and she gave him the flag to do whatever he deemed to do with it. The neighbors were so moved by this that they had a giant party, and they came and they knocked down all the fences. Now Annie and her neighbors have barbecues, walk around in each other's yard, and they treat each other like neighbors. It took a heart attack and the threat that this may be the end of your life, but she began to see, what might my neighbor think of what I'm doing? So, do we do these things? Do we honor everybody, not just the rich? Well, of course we do that, don't we? I mean, we have a sign outside that says all are welcome, so of course we honor everybody, don't we? Maybe sometimes we try to, but then there's times when we'd rather do what we want to do. And it's not usually wealth and power, though, that lead us astray. Sometimes it's just our own convenience. That's the way we've always done things. Let me give you an example. Last year, when Pastor Craig was on sabbatical, Pastor Nikki and I and some leaders of the congregation tried a lot of new things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. Some people liked, some people didn't. And we went on from there. Some of them we've already changed back to the way we were doing things. And then there's one that worked exactly the way it was supposed to, but not everybody's happy about. And that would be the bread. Now, let me be the first to say, I love Hawaiian sweetbread. It is tasty, and it's fluffy, and it's sweet. It ought to be tasty. It's full of things like butter and pineapple juice and eggs and soft flour, but about 18 months ago, I started noticing something. Maybe it was because I'm aware of those people with severe allergies that I have in my own family. There are people who are with us every week that when we were using the Hawaiian sweetbread, they didn't commune. They didn't join us at the table, even though they were here every week and part of the community. We were offering gluten-free wafers, but not everybody who needed them took them. There were reasons for that, all having to do with the fact that for people with celiac disease and other serious allergies, even having the crumbs that fall from the table that has wheat or gluten in it is going to make them extremely ill for days. It can be an uncomfortable reaction that goes on 48 hours or more. So unlike offering grape juice and wine on the same tray or in two different chalices on the altar, contamination doesn't let us put both things on the same plate or even sometimes on the same altar and be able to guarantee that nobody will have problems. What it ended up meaning was that people who could not have our tasty Hawaiian sweetbread got left out. So it's not about money or gold rings, but it's still about doing what James said we shouldn't do, which is exclude people or treat them differently because of who they are. I kept thinking there had to be a better way than what we were doing to be able to have everybody at the same table at the same time. But it meant trying something new. And fortunately, when Pastor Nikki came to us, she had some experience with that. Like me, she has family members with those serious allergies, and she has a friend, a pastor in another church she's close to, who actually has celiac themselves. So she knew about different options, and together we started trying them. And I'll admit, some were better than others. You remember probably that if you were here, we had a sample time and a goodies time that we let people taste about 5 different gluten-free breads. Out of all of those, we found one that was pretty good. And we kept asking people who had those serious allergy problems where their favorite bread came from. And from that, we found an even better one than the one we started out with. Today, we can openly say to everyone who joins us for worship that not only are they the beloved children of God, welcome to be here, but they don't have to worry about joining us at the Lord's table. Members, friends, visitors with those allergies can be all at the same table at the same time, in the same way. Nobody's set aside or treated differently, at least not for that reason during communion. It's a way to keep working our faith, just like bringing friends to Jesus or being a fierce mother hen in search of healing for a child or a friend. So we keep on working it, even when it means we have to give up something sweet and fluffy in return. Amen.